Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wise Credit Management. This is Lesson 8. We're going to talk about credit counseling versus bankruptcy protection. We're going to discuss debt management plans and that they're good for people who are currently behind on debt. We're also going to talk about Chapter 13, bankruptcy protection. It's also good for people who are behind on debt and or facing foreclosure, repossession, situations like that. And we're going to talk about Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is good for people who are frankly overwhelmed with debt and pretty much unable to repay it. And also, they need to be able to pass the means test. And we're going to talk more about that. Remember, bankruptcy is protection. In other words, you're using the bankruptcy courts to protect yourself from creditors and anyone coming after you. It takes at least 2 years to recover, but always remember that joy cometh in the morning, and we're going to have a real world testimonial with regard to recovering from bankruptcy. So with that having been said, let's get started. And hey, if this is your first time joining us, we're so happy to have you here. This is just a short introduction and a review of the Essentials class. We have several pretty simple goals for the class. Mainly, I want you to understand the principles of wise credit management. My name is Jason Johnson, and while I was an active real estate professional, I focused on first-time homebuyers, many of whom needed help with their credit. Then one day, I believe that God put it on my heart to develop the program that I wish existed for people with credit problems. I know this class isn't the most entertaining, but I believe that it will be the most informative for you. It's completely free to students. It's the most comprehensive program that I know of, and if you pay attention and learn the material, you will be able to build and maintain a good credit score to help you accomplish your goals. I want you to learn how credit really works while being simple and avoiding too much complicated math. It's wisdom that works in the real world. All views expressed are my own and from my experience as a former mortgage professional. Just like your accounting professor won't do your taxes for you, I can teach you how the credit system works, but I can't help you with your credit. On the other hand, what if you do need a professional to help you out? Well, we do have members that can help you. Most real estate professionals can't, or rather shouldn't, try to help you out with your credit because it's just not what they do. You don't really need to understand something as complicated as credit algorithms. You just need to know someone who can understand it. If you need help with getting a good credit score or buying a home, we have a directory of professionals who are ready, willing, and able to help. The directory also has many other types of professionals who you might need along the way. I'm not endorsing any specific company or service, but if that person lists their company on this website, you know they're willing to help you on your journey. And if you don't want to call professionals one by one to explain your situation and see if they can help, you can go to wisecreditprofessionals.com and write one time about the details of your situation, then sit back and let up to 3 of our Wise Credit professionals contact you about how they can help. I show you a lot of screenshots of other companies' websites so that you can see where the information that I get comes from, but the class is considered a new work for education and commentary purposes and therefore does not violate copyright law. Many of the screenshots that I use are directly from the company that calculates your FICO credit score and from the big 3 credit bureaus. We do offer affiliate links, and I would appreciate if you use them, but I also strongly encourage you to use the affiliate links of the other members. When you open accounts with one of these companies, you'll get your own affiliate links offering either cash payments or statement credit, which could add up to over $1,000. And you can see how easy it is to forward the link to this class as well as your own affiliate links to anyone who might need this class. And if you want to see what new opportunities are available since I created this video, you can go to the home page and click on Options and Opportunities for you. This is where you can find our directory to local professionals and not just someone on the phone offering you a rate they can't actually give you. And you can also find affiliate links to other companies that can help you along your journey. Guys, who wishes I would talk just a little bit faster and make the videos just a little bit shorter? Well, I can. Just go to your settings and adjust the playback speed. Guys, thank you so much, and with all that having been said, let's begin. You know, James couldn't have said it any better. We all stumble in many ways. There are a lot of different ways to have difficulties in this world, and financially is certainly one of those. For those of you who haven't been here, I invented a character named Charlie. I use stock photographs of basically a character. And now that I get to thinking more and more about it, I basically invented a modern day Job from the Bible. He's going through everything that I could throw at him. He had some kind of a medical injury. We made him lose his job. He's going through a divorce. He's behind on all of his bills. He's worried about lawsuits, wage garnishment, losing his retirement fund. You know, we're going to talk him through all of that later on in this lesson, but the one thing that I keep reminding people who are in this particular situation is that joy cometh in the morning. That's one of the main things that I emphasize to people who are going through great difficulty. We're going to find a way to get you through it and make it better. Now, Curtis and Angela, they are the couple that are kind of like the cliche. They want to, they just got married. They want to build a life together and raise a family. They want a home. And their biggest problem is a high debt burden. And they want to know their options. Well, we went through a detailed plan to get them out of debt while increasing their credit score in lesson 6. But what if they reveal to us, well, things are actually a lot worse than what they originally let on. Instead of $5,800 in debt, they actually wound up being. You can add a zero to everything that we covered in lesson 6. We're going to talk about what their options are because obviously this is quite a bit to handle and recover from. They currently, and again, this is a hypothetical situation, not actual people, but stock photographs. But people can get into a situation where they're not able to make the minimum payments on all their accounts. So they've gotten behind. All of a sudden, if you're behind, you're facing late fees, you're facing the highest interest rate that those credit cards can charge. And by the time somebody's in that situation, oftentimes they're cutting back to the point of, and I use a cliche, beans and rice. They are cutting back on everything and still can't make it. Well, in this particular circumstance, in our advanced lessons, after you graduate, in other words, after you take the graduation course, go through the last, we'll call it the graduation test. But after you go through that, it will unlock certain advanced classes, including a Wise Path to Wealth class, in which I take them through a very reasonable, measured approach to owning real estate. And this couple can actually very reasonably work their way through to retire as almost multimillionaires. So, you know, if you're facing this, don't think that your life is over, that you'll never recover. In fact, we're going to walk this couple, a hypothetical couple, through to the point that they can retire very comfortably. But it's got to start somewhere. So let's get them started. We talk a great deal in this class about the wealth gap, and the wise path to wealth in the advanced lessons is designed to get you on the right side of the wealth gap. Remember that in my philosophy, the right way to get on the right side of the wealth gap is to own, not to owe. And remember, houses appreciate, cars depreciate, and credit cards create financial slaves. And what do I mean by that? King Solomon reminds us that the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is slave to the lender. So the question is, how much money do you spend on debt every month? So you take your total debt payments. Now think of how many hours you have to work to earn just enough to pay your total debt. To me, that is modern day economic slavery. And let's start taking a look at your options to get you out of that economic slavery. You've got several options at your disposal. The first that we're going to talk about, you can approach the first set of professionals that you can approach are really known as certified credit counselors. Now, credit counseling, and there are a lot of different terms for this particular scenario and for these professionals, but we kind of refer to them as credit counselors. Usually, they're not for profit. They're usually compensated by creditors based on how much money that you pay back to those lenders while you're in credit counseling. I know that sounds complicated, but if you think about it this way, someone might be on the verge of declaring bankruptcy and therefore a creditor would lose everything. On the other hand, they offer a different option that means that you pay back some of your debts, but not all of it and not with all the late fees and everything. That means that the lender winds up getting maybe half of their money back, but the lenders will compensate credit counselors because the credit counselor was kind of able to save the day to keep you as a consumer out of bankruptcy and having that difficulty, but also help the lender to get repaid some of their money because, frankly, your financial position changed. Whatever difficulty you had led you to this place. It's not uncommon, the debt management plan that they can help set up is something that can help certain situations. And one thing that I'll mention is that credit counselors, they can assist you in disputing, but they usually don't offer those services. Well, the FTC offers some advice on finding reputable credit counselors. Like we talked about, they can advise you on managing money, debts, help you develop a budget, and offer free educational materials and workshops. Hey, maybe one day they'll be offering this class as part of their counseling. But the counselors are certified and trained in consumer credit, money, and debt management and budgeting. Now, that could be written, as I'm reading that to you, I'm kind of scrutinizing it. That could be written so much better, but I could write this class so much better too. So we're going to forgive them of that. But basically, they are there to help you set up a budget and help you determine what's best for you. Like I said, a community service with help in budgeting and debt reduction. They're usually members of, and let me highlight this over here, National Foundation for Credit Counseling, nfcc.org. So if you want to look up your professional and make sure that they are legitimate in some way before you start working with them. But it's really best for people who are either currently behind on payments and like I said, a lot of times a debt management plan can wipe off late payments and help negotiate your interest rates and maybe cut down some of the debt. So that's who it's really best for. And wow, down here in the bottom, I trade some of these. We're shooting this right now, and I left in a line that says we're going to discuss this in lesson 8. Well, guess what? Here we are. But I used this slide in lesson 7 to introduce credit counselors, and then I just copied it into lesson 8. So nobody's perfect. Speaking of nobody's perfect, we're back to the federal government's website. Avoid organizations that push a debt management plan as your only option before they spend time talking to you about your financial situation. So basically, they want to make sure that someone knows exactly what you're looking at because bankruptcy might be a better option for you, but debt management plans can certainly help certain situations. They might be able to help you if you're behind on your mortgage, but really, Chapter 13 bankruptcy is similar to a debt management plan, with one notable exception that I'm going to talk about while I'm talking about credit counseling. If you're facing foreclosure right now, then Chapter 13 is probably going to be a better way to go. Okay? You've got, and what we talked about in lesson 6 is a self imposed debt management plan. Now, I discuss it as wise debt reduction, but the simple idea is that you're going to work on your own budget. You're going to cut back to beans and rice. You're going to stop buying cookies and ice cream. And for those of you who are here for lesson 6, that's a shot at myself. I've gotten a little overweight over the years, but you can also call your student debt company and work with deferrals. As I'm shooting this particular video and this lesson, the student loan debt payments, a lot of things are up in the air, so you're going to have to take a look at what the current options for you are with student loans. But remember, you can get deferrals rather than letting those just piling up late payments. You can also work with your car lender or your home lender, in other words, your mortgage company, to put late payments on the back of your loan. Now, that's a much more complicated topic, but the thing that I want to express to everyone is if you're just behind a couple of payments and you're able to get restarted making payments, instead of doing something too drastic, maybe you just give your lender a call, whether it's a bank or credit union or mortgage company. Give them a call and explain the situation and ask them what they're willing to do. Chances are they're willing to put a payment on the back of your loan. Now, one caveat to that I would mention, some companies, when they do that, they continue to report you as late. And if they report you as late, even though you think that you're caught up, your credit score is going to suffer. You might not even know it, which is why we teach you to monitor your credit report. And if you notice that you're continuing to pile up late payments, even though you're making what you thought was payments on time, work with your lender. Maybe you do actually need to catch up on those payments to stop having it reported as late. I mean, those are things that I want to mention to my students because I want you guys to have the best chance possible to get out of your situation and into a better situation. And always remember that credit card companies can often offer hardship programs without having to close the account. So they want to get paid their money back just as bad as anybody. And if you're in this situation, their main concern is that you're going to file bankruptcy. They're going to lose everything that they lent you. Therefore, they're willing to work with you, maybe a little bit more than what you would think. So, with a debt management plan, you're going to work on your budget and decide how much you can afford to pay toward the debt, but you're going to do that with a credit counselor, okay? They're also going to work with your lenders to lower your interest rates, reduce late fees, things like that. They might help you reduce the balance on your credit accounts. So these are good options for you if you're in a situation where you need this. And the basic idea of a debt management plan is you take all of your outstanding unsecured debts, so to speak. Any company willing to work with a debt management plan, you will consolidate all of that into one monthly payment. The debt management plan will then make the payments to the creditors. You'll make that payment for about 5 years. It could be less, but you'll pay toward your debt management plan for about 5 years. So you're in this for a little while. Remember that you must make every payment and make it on time. This is kind of your way out, so to speak. So this is your last chance before you need to take more drastic measures. You cannot take out additional debt without approval. So you can take out additional debt, but you have to get approval. Accounts involved in the plan will have a special notation on the account saying that it's in debt management or credit counseling, something of that nature, which will keep potential creditors from lending to you without that permission. Okay, there is one more thing that I really want to. The notation that I mentioned there does not affect your credit score. Having a notation next to the debt does not affect your credit score. On the other hand, the things that you go through while you're in credit counseling and probably before you got into credit counseling, being in credit counseling actually can affect your credit score. It can bring late accounts to current status. Does that help or hurt your credit score? That's going to help you. You can reduce the balance on your accounts. So is that going to help you or hurt you? Well, it kind of depends one way or the other as to whether or not the account's still open and active and all of those things. But that can affect your credit score. As we've talked about several times in the class, for those of you who are just watching this class first, closing any accounts does affect your credit score. In other words, closing an open and active account, you lose the credit history for that account, and that will almost certainly negatively affect your credit score. So there are effects to your credit score, but the thing is, if you're in a situation where you need a debt management plan, your credit score probably isn't your primary concern right now. How you recover, and the idea that you can recover in 5 years without, I say this hesitantly, but without a scratch, so to speak, and a bankruptcy that counts against you for 7 to 10 years, that might be your main objective. So that's the credit counseling notation. Doesn't actually affect your credit score, but the things that you go through during credit counseling and during your debt management plan will. Debt management plans don't specifically help with mortgage or rent, like we talked about. That's a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. It doesn't help with auto loans, again, Chapter 13. If you're facing foreclosure or repossession, these guys can help. They can call your lender for you, but that's not exactly what they do. Because your accounts will have the debt management plan notation, you're going to have trouble securing favorable financing for at least a year. And your accounts might be closed at the end of that. When they're paid off, they very easily could be closed. Remember Psalms 35, for his anger is but for a moment, his favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Guys, that's so true in so many ways, and that is one of the perfect verses that we can rely on during this particular time if you're really going through great difficulty. Remember, joy comes in the morning. Well, let's get you through the night so that you can see a brighter morning. Now, first thing that I want to mention, and we talked about this in Lesson 7, but if you didn't watch Lesson 7, a quick recap is I wanted to kind of mention where bankruptcy laws come from back when our founding fathers created the Republic and they created the Constitution. It did not, in fact, the Articles of Confederation had no provision for bankruptcy. Well, there was a Revolutionary War financier named Robert Morris. They actually offered him Treasury Secretary, but he declined. And their second option was Alexander Hamilton. Now, Robert Morris wound up, he declined because he needed to get his finances back in order. So he helped fund the Revolutionary War and later on actually wound up in debtor's prison. And as the story goes, George Washington went to see him and decided for himself that this was absolutely unacceptable, that we put this guy who helped us do this in debtor's prison. So he lobbied and Congress passed, and I've got by one vote. I always find that interesting that way back then in 1800, Congress was fighting with each other and passing things by one vote. They passed the Bankruptcy Act of 1800 partially, let's see here, in part to get him out. So, and there were some other people who went through bankruptcy. James Audubon, he's well known for the Audubon Society. He was in debtor's prison for a while. When he got out, he embarked on his celebrated bird painting series. We've got other people, Edgar Allan Poe and P.T. Barnum. So, guys, bankruptcy, if you're going through it, you're not alone. You're not the first. In fact, a guy who helped us when the Revolutionary War was put in debtor's prison. So we've got it a lot easier today. In fact, in part thanks to his short sentence. Remember, I mean, frankly, we can talk about this, but we'll talk about it later. But God uses all things for good. Next, we're going to talk about attorneys. So prior to now, we were talking about a credit counselor, not a lawyer. Well, what do lawyers do? Well, they handle lawsuits, they handle cases, and they can help protect you using bankruptcy laws. There are two different bankruptcy laws. There's a Chapter 13 bankruptcy and a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. We're going to discuss Chapter 7 here in a moment, but Chapter 13 is very similar to a debt management plan, except and some notable exceptions that they can help you prevent foreclosure. So if you're actively facing foreclosure and you can't work it out with your creditor, you can't work it out with the mortgage company. If somebody's going to repossess your car, if you've called the company and said, hey, what can we do? No, we're coming to pick up your car. It's over. All right, you can file Chapter 13 to help stop all this, and it'll also help stop collections, judgments, wage garnishments, etc. So if you're in that position, go ahead and talk to a lawyer. I am doing my best to provide you with a directory of professionals, including lawyers and bankruptcy attorneys who get it, who get what we're trying to do in this class, and who will give you a free consultation. There's no harm in giving a lawyer a call and finding out what your options are and what's best for you. In Chapter 13, you get to keep your assets. So if you've got a lot of things that you don't want the court to take away from you, like fancy cars or something like that, and maybe you just lost your job for a little while, and now you've got everything back, but you want to stop the foreclosure or repossession. That's Chapter 13. Your attorney and a court trustee are going to review your assets and your debts to determine a debt repayment plan. So they're, like I said, they're going to put together something similar to a debt management plan, but it's a court trustee helping do that. You're going to be on a strict budget, and like the debt management plan, you must make all the payments on time, and you must get approval before obtaining new debt. So you can get new debt, but you have to ask permission first. You can buy a house during Chapter 13. It's going to stay on your credit report for 7 years after filing. So this is a slightly shorter period of time. And again, remember the 7 years rule from lesson 7. That this will stay on your credit report for 7 years after filing. You keep paying any secured debt that you have. In other words, in this class, I focus on how to recover from any difficulty that you're having and what your credit is going to look like when you get done. So if you go through Chapter 13, if you can keep paying those secured accounts, usually it's a mortgage, a car loan, and might be student loans or something of that nature. Keep paying those secured debts and use the credit rebuilding principles that we talked about in lesson 4, secured loans and secured credit cards. Hey, when you get through Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and you shouldn't need secured credit cards by that point, but you can rebuild your credit fairly quickly after you discharge your Chapter 13. Now we're going to switch to Chapter 7, okay? So Chapter 7, you have to submit a inventory of all of your assets, and you can keep only your exempt assets, some equity in your home, an inexpensive car, and a cash car like the Golden Nugget is looking more and more helpful these days. You can keep the money in your retirement account, and maybe I should have made a special slide for this, but guys, a lot of times when someone is first starting to go through difficulty and they're starting to get phone calls from creditors, they're starting to face the idea of losing their home or their car. A lot of times somebody can consider cashing out their retirement account. Just remember, if it gets to this point, anyway, in other words, if you can only pull a certain amount out of your retirement account and it's not going to stop all of this, you get to keep your retirement account if you didn't cash it out while you're fighting to stay out of Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Sometimes it's better just to rip the band-aid off and get all of this stuff out of your life and keep your retirement account in full, so you can keep your money in your retirement account. Personal item, and you can also keep personal items like a wedding ring. Talk to a lawyer about what you can keep, but it dismisses all secured debts. So in other words, every credit card that you have gets, you can't pick and choose which credit cards you keep making payments on. They're all dismissed, and they're gone. but it does not affect some obligations like federal student loans and child support. Now, you have to pass a means test. This gets really complicated, but basically, take the court will look at your 6 months, your most recent 6 months average monthly income. Now, if you've lost your job, if you're in a medical difficulty, like we talk about our friend Charlie, whatever's going on, your most recent 6 months of income is probably going to be less than whatever your state's median income is. And that, like I said, it gets to be a complicated formula. It takes into account kids and dependents. So talk to an attorney about that. But if you can pass that means test, keep your retirement account intact, file Chapter 7, and dismiss all unsecured debts. So all of your unsecured debts are gone. Your secured debts stay on your credit report. Bankruptcy stays on your credit report for the Chapter 7 stays on your credit report for 10 years after filing. You can qualify to buy a home using an FHA loan in 2 years, and you can use conventional financing in 3 years. So all of that is to say that, hey, if you're in a bad place already, if you're drowning in debt, chances are you're not going to be able to own a home to qualify for a mortgage in the next 2 or 3 years anyway. So the maximum time that you're going to have to spend without being able to qualify for a home is 3 years. Just being very real with yourself, were you going to be able to work your way out of debt within 3 years in the first place? With a debt management plan, perhaps, and perhaps 5 years, but you're going to wind up closing down your accounts anyway. So it's really a decision that's going to have to be made by you, and you can always ask professionals for their opinion, but you have to make that choice. If you do go through Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can immediately begin to reestablish credit using the principles that we talked about in Lesson 4. And we're going to talk about, for those of you who were here in Lesson 5, and I've discussed them several times since, there's a MyFICO forum in which a established contributor called Debt Stinks tells his story of how he went through Chapter 7. Now, his story is that he kept student loans that were not discharged. So he already had things that he was making payments on, but he reestablished his credit. He got 7 revolving accounts during that period of time, and he was able to close on an FHA loan within 3 years. So he was able to buy a brand new house within 3 years of filing Chapter 7. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute, but I wanted to take us back to Curtis and Angela. They want to own a home. They've got a high debt burden. Their middle scores 630s or so. They need a plan. Well, remember back when we thought that their revolving accounts were only, what's this, $5,000 plus 800, so $5,800. In fact, in month 1, here we go. Middle score 636, and we had them develop a budget and cut out $100 of whatever spending, eating out or cookies and ice cream or cable, whatever it is, so that they're going to put $100 a month extra toward their accounts. Well, by month 31, they were able to pay off everything, or at least all of their revolving accounts, and they only had a few months left on a vehicle payment and $1,500 left on a student loan. So their credit score, in theory, again, this is a hypothetical situation, would have gone from the 630s to about 750. So they're doing pretty good, okay? Well, actually, what happens if they are in a worse situation than what we originally thought? They're not able to make their minimum monthly payments on all their accounts. They got behind. Now they're facing all these late fees, maximum interest rates, and like I'd said, sometimes, and I use just beans and rice as a cliche to say, hey, they're cutting back on everything that they possibly can and still not making it. Well, if you take a look at this, let's just say Curtis is a truck driver. Now, it's not entirely impossible for you to need a $120,000 truck, or maybe both of them have pretty nice cars. Who knows? Maybe Capital One and Discover. That's a lot of money to owe on credit cards. Obviously, Kohl's, I just added a zero to all of their debts, okay? $7,000 on Kohl's. That's almost certainly not going to happen. But if you imagine all their retail cards added up, where they could owe a lot of money on that. And take a look at their minimum debt payments, $6,400. That's basically twice, or that's basically two houses put together in a lot of regions of the country. So, what are their options? Well, let's talk about Chapter 7. How much debt do they actually have? And I kind of showed you a hypothetical breakdown. We're going to have them consult with an attorney to decide if they meet the means test. And like I said, the means test is a complicated formula comparing your income to the local median income. But the first option, if you've got $6,500 a month in payments and you don't have the means to pay it, perhaps Chapter 7 would be your first and best option. Well, what about Chapter 13? Like we said, 5 years of payments to a court trustee and then 2 more years of having the bankruptcy on your credit report. So after the Chapter 13 is over, you might still have, and this would allow them to keep whatever nice expensive cars that they have. But well, and I'm not gonna guarantee that to anybody. Let me walk that back for a second. If Curtis has got himself an 18-wheeler, that's one thing. But you're gonna have to talk to your attorney about exactly what the details are with your situation, but you can probably keep most of your things. Also, are they facing collections, lawsuits, wage garnishments, or foreclosure or repossession? Chapter 13 is going to be a good option for them. Well, what about getting a debt management plan? Okay, so if you remember from a minute ago, Capital One 30,000 and Discover 20,000 and Kohl's 7,000. All of those you could probably fit into a debt management plan pretty easily. So, are they incurring late fees or they're not capable of restricting their budget enough to be able to pay off the debts within 5 years? Well, a debt management plan might be the best way for them to go. And then the self-imposed debt management plan. We talked about that in lesson 6. The hypothetical scenario that I gave them, depending on their income, it might be possible. Get yourself a one-bedroom apartment and a golden nugget. And in lesson 6, I actually talked about Curtis, if he needs a work truck, getting himself a golden goose. But the simple idea is get something inexpensive. You don't need a $120,000 vehicle unless it's, like I said, a semi or something of that nature, that it's an actual business expense. But guys, if you can do a self-imposed debt management plan, try that. So here are their options: 1 to 4, self-imposed debt management plan, or credit counseling, or Chapter 13 bankruptcy, or Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So there are ways out, and don't get too drugged down. Other people have been through it. You're going through it. You'll be better afterwards. And take the advanced course called The Wise Path to Wealth. We're gonna see what these guys what's in store for them later. So, and we're back to Charlie. Let's finish Charlie's story, or at least this part of Charlie's story. He'll come back in lesson 10 and we'll applaud for him. But Charlie, like I keep saying, Charlie's really been through everything I could throw at him. Kind of like Job. Except I'm creating a hypothetical character. We've got Charlie. If you're in Charlie's situation, I want you to focus on your well-being. I want you to focus on your recovery from whatever illness you're going through. Focus on everyday expenses, and if you've got child support, that's a very important thing for you to try to maintain. Focus on getting a good job. Focus on getting yourself in a place where you can recover. Now, once you're healthy and you have a stable job, and then you can start taking a look at what's possible to handle the debt that accumulated from whatever situation you had. Now, one thing I want to mention for anybody who's really going through this, a lot of times medical bills often don't get fully processed through whatever insurance you've got for quite a while. You might not have your final balance due for 6 months or so after treatment is complete. So you may very well wind up needing to recover for a little while anyway, while they take care of all the insurance stuff. Now, like I said, you won't have a final list of all your bills for about 6 months. You don't know what all you're up against until you get all of your bills, until you can sit there and read through them. Is a self-imposed debt management plan really a good option for Charlie? It depends on how much money he's gonna make versus how much money he's behind. But in this situation, I wouldn't really think so. Credit counseling and a debt management plan, that really doesn't sound like the best option to me, but if he's making enough money, that might help him out and it would help him avoid the bankruptcy protection and that notation on his credit report. On the other hand, uh, chapter chapter 13, guys, talk to an attorney about your options and then take action. This class is about giving you the knowledge so that you can make the wise decisions about your own credit. And I want all of you guys to understand that bankruptcy laws protect you from bill collectors, from judgments, from wage garnishment, from losing your home, from losing your car. If you're like Curtis and we made him a truck driver, if your livelihood is in your 18-wheeler and you're about to lose it, consider Chapter 13. Just remember that we gave Charlie some options, and at the end, once he can make it through, once he gets to a place where he's making one reasonable bill per month through Chapter 13, or if he's gone through Chapter 7, all of that debt is wiped away and he can start rebuilding his credit immediately, you're probably going to be a much, much happier camper. So rebuild your credit like we talked about in lesson 4. Joy cometh in the morning. And as Paul teaches us in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, all things work together for good to those who love God. Guys, he wasn't kidding. Trust God and keep going. And this is really a recap of lesson 5, but now it might take on new meaning to anyone who watched lesson 5. But if you just found this website, if you haven't been looking through all of the lessons, if you haven't taken all of them, if you're just this is your first time, myfico.com, and I'm a big proponent of using their services. I use them myself, but myfico.com has forums in which people can express their experience. And this is my favorite guy, Debt Stinks. Obviously, I would never use someone who actually used their own name, but whoever Debt Stinks is, I'm grateful to you for sharing your experience. This is a couple that I assume it's the man writing based on the fact that he says my wife. It's a couple that filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy in November of 2017. They wound up closing on a new construction home loan using FHA in August of 2020. So less than 3 years later, after filing Chapter 7, they were able to close on a new construction loan. Now, one thing that I will mention in this particular class, it's pretty important to remember, this couple had 6 different student loans outstanding that they continued to make payments on because you cannot discharge as of yet. You cannot discharge student loans through bankruptcy. That might change. You're going to have to consult with a lawyer regarding that. But they kept their student loans and they kept paying them. That's automatically going to give them a credit score and a history after bankruptcy. And after bankruptcy, they reestablished their credit. They've gotten 2 car loans. This one, I tore this guy up. No, no, no. Don't get a brand new car right before you try to go get a home loan. And actually, it wound up that he just refinanced his car. Don't refinance your car right before you go get a new home loan either. But they also reestablished their credit by getting 7 revolving accounts. And they kept all their accounts at a zero. If you're going through the forums and you see this acronym, all zero except one. So a zero balance except for one with a $2 balance. So he had a point zero 0.01 or 0.02, I don't know, debt utilization ratio. He did everything right except for this brand new car loan. And all of these revolving accounts were opened after his bankruptcy, starting 11 of 17. When did he file bankruptcy? 11 of 17. So they're all over 1 year old. That's worth mentioning. So, like I said, he just bought a new car. Well, actually, it turned out that he refinanced his car. But one person actually said, and this is a tip from lesson 5, instead of all zero except one, you might want to carry a small balance on several cards. That speaks to what we discussed in lesson 5, where we talked about maximizing your credit score. You might want to have a 1% utilization ratio instead of all zeros. But this guy's scores, he needed a 680. He was at 673. After he, and this is really refinanced, after he refinanced his new car, his scores were lower by quite a few points. So and then here I talk about him refinancing, but he lost 12 points just because he refinanced his car. So in the end, what wound up happening? Well, he needed a 680. He wound up doing everything right and to keep going, so to speak. And one thing that he did say here is that he had a 685 before he refinanced. So that's worth mentioning. If you refinance, remember you're going to lose points. Your credit score is going to fall 12 points, or at least his did. Well, what wound up happening? So, like we'd said, he had I think 3 months, 4 months to build a credit score. His score rebounded to the point that he had a middle score of 716 by the time it was time to lock. So his score rebounded very rapidly after the refinance, which I would have told him not to do. But he wound up rebounding anyway. He just closed his FHA loan at 3.25%. Everybody remember those days? He locked in July but closed in September. And down here, he talks about 716. And he also talks about hoping to refinance his loan. So this guy really came through at the end of bankruptcy. In less than 3 years, he owned a brand new house at 3.25% interest. He did okay. I want to mention one more thing. Guys, if you are in a bad place, and I don't remember if this person actually used a specific name or if I just wanted to get all this in one screenshot. I think I just wanted it all in one screenshot. So this person is talking to Debt Stinks. And he or she also says, hey, we really appreciate the info. This is really stressful. I don't want to burn anyone in what they mean as a company, but it just seems like I'll never get out of this mess. Debt Stinks confirmed that. That was the feeling I had a little over 3 years ago when they filed for bankruptcy. I'll say this, once I finally pulled the trigger and I filed, I never looked back. I have zero regrets about filing. Obviously, we're good people at heart. It's human nature, and I don't want to cause harm or loss to another individual or lending institution. The bankruptcy code, however, was created for good people who fall on hard times and need a reset button. You know, a Revolutionary War financier also helped contribute to us as a country all of those years ago. In fact, when the country was first starting, by going to prison over debts, he helped inspire the bankruptcy laws. So, yes, this person is absolutely right, and they've probably never heard of where the bankruptcy laws came from, but they need a reset. If you need a reset, guys, these laws exist for a reason. They're for you, to protect you. Your overall health is, well, it says what's more important, your overall health or a few bucks to a conglomerate credit card company. Really, what I want to express is that your relationship with God is more important than your financial status. Your health, your mental health, and your physical health is more important. Your food, your shelter, your clothing, uh, a fulfilling job, and a purpose in life. strong relationships with your family, with your friends. Guys, if you're in a bad place, I've given you several options that are there for you to help you get through whatever difficulty you're having. And like I'd said before, we're gonna walk these characters through their situation and give them the ability to recover, because joy cometh in the morning. When I sat down to create this class, I really wanted to say the things that God would want you to know while you're making decisions with your credit. And you know I really take this verse to heart. Sometimes God provides people to help you when you really need it. Our professional members participate in wise credit management to serve you by doing what they do best. And remember, you can watch these videos online, but you should also find a local meeting to come and share your difficulties and also your successes. Remember, we celebrate success. I tried to make it easy to find local groups and local professionals on wisecreditmanagement.com. Back when I was younger and just starting out, in fact, it was before I became a real estate professional, I found a house that was a really good deal, so I put it under contract. It was being sold by a couple that was getting a divorce and it needed a lot of rehab work. It was a really great deal, and I had a pretty big down payment. So I went down to my bank and they actually said no. And the guy who turned me down was actually kind of rude about it. Luckily, I didn't give up and I found a different bank who would do the loan for me. But while I was building this class, I decided I wanted to make it a lot easier for you to find somebody who can help you. All you need to do is type in some details about your situation, and you can have up to 3 professionals contact you about how they can help you. So, whatever your situation is, maybe you've got a rehab that you want to do, maybe you want to get an FHA loan, but you've got bad credit. Whatever it is, you can enter some details about your situation, and we'll help you find a wise credit professional to help get you approved. Well, what if you want to find a great deal like I found, but you're not sure how to go about doing that? Well, what you need is a buyer's agent. What you should do is enter in what you're looking for, and we'll help you find a local real estate agent that can help you find the deal that you need. Just type it in, and we'll help you find a professional that'll work for you. And of course, you need insurance, but really what you want is the best coverage on your home for yourself and your family. And guys, don't be like our friend Charlie and have a major health problem without life and health insurance. Especially if you're buying a home and you have a family, please contact an agent to get yourself proper coverage. And guys, if you have to make major decisions about your retirement account, especially if you're going to withdraw money for the down payment, please talk to a certified financial planner. Also, if you're a freelancer or some type of gig worker, please contact someone about getting a Roth or a self-employed retirement program started. And guys, if you're behind on any of your bills, maybe late fees are being added onto your account, maybe you're considering bankruptcy, please contact a certified credit counselor about a debt management plan to see if you qualify for Chapter 7 or if you need to prevent foreclosure or automobile repossession. It's time to talk to a bankruptcy attorney. On the other hand, consumer protection attorneys specialize in the Fair Credit Reporting Act and suing for violations, so they can actually wind up getting you money out of these companies that are harassing you. And credit repair organizations can help you by professionally disputing bad debt. Many of them are former or even current mortgage professionals who know the laws on disputing and how to get things removed from your credit report. And finally, if you need a reliable and inexpensive car like our class mascot, the Golden Nugget, then you should contact one of our dealers who can help you find what you need. There's always homework in this class, isn't there? Are you drowning in debt right now? Could you really use some help? Should you use a debt management plan or bankruptcy protection? Guys, if you are in that situation, and obviously this is a stock photo, but if you really are in the cliche drowning in debt situation, don't be afraid to go ahead and go through this process and take care of yourself first. and use whatever laws are available to you to help you out. As always, document your journey. If you go through bankruptcy, there's going to be quite a few documents to keep in a legal file, but really what you're doing is creating your story, your success story, your story of overcoming whatever difficulty you're facing in your life right now. Always remember, join our community. Guys, I try to be on social media. I try to give us a way to communicate with each other. So join the website, join our community on Facebook and LinkedIn. I know that the Twitter thing is old. I forgot to replace that. My bad. And if you're on YouTube, remember, like and subscribe. But guys, we celebrate success, and I take that very seriously because you can inspire other people. Also, speaking of inspiring other people, if you know someone who needs this class, please send them a link, text it to them, email it to them, post it on your social media, do whatever you need to do to get the word out that this class is here to help people free of charge. Do you know anyone who needs this information? And we celebrate success. Guys, focus on goals and not obstacles. Get started, develop your goals, and then apply the knowledge that you now have toward managing your credit successfully. Quick preview of the next lesson, identity theft. Anyone can have their identity stolen by anyone else. Wow, we're going to talk about that, but like I said, this can happen to anyone, including me. Somebody actually used a fraudulent driver's license, and I was listed as a 6'5", 375-pound black male. Guys, I'm going to walk you through my experience. I'm going to explain to you how you can recover from identity theft. I learned this the hard way. I even went to a lawyer, and the lawyer, I trusted him. Turns out he didn't know what he was doing. But the lawyers on my website, now they know what they're doing because they've taken this class. So if you're the victim of identity theft, there's a specific set of steps that you need to take, get through it, recover, and you'll know more than my lawyer did. So that's what we're going to talk about in lesson 9. Guys, thank you so much for sticking with me, and here we are at the end of lesson 8. I hope to see you in lesson 9, identity theft. Take care. May God bless you on your journey.